here. So I'm, a fan of starting things on time. People have certainly started to arrive. So we'll keep this slide up and I'll just tell you a little bit about myself. That's where we're going to start and what's going to happen at our meeting today. It's going to formally start in a couple of minutes, but I can tell you that my name is Jane Farrow and I will be facilitating the meeting tonight. I work, my job with this shelter service here is the community engagement work. So one of the big events, of course, is the public meeting, and that's where you are here today for the online telephone information session. The purpose of tonight's meeting is to share information on the 556 Sherburne Street St. Simon's shelter, and to provide an opportunity to speak with city staff and ask questions, raise concerns. We'll be going over in detail how to do that, but basically there is a question and answer box that will be provided for you to type questions into, or if you're on the phone, you can ask your question on the phone by unmuting we will sort of take a speakers list. We'll explain that in a bit more detail when we get closer to the Q&A section. First, there will be some presentations from city staff and staff associated with the St. Simon Shelter. So they'll explain what the program is, what's going on at the shelter, and the city staff will explain how the shelter operations work in general. So those presentations will probably take up to about half an hour, and that means we'll be giving over at least 90 minutes to your questions, concerns, and comments about the St. Simon's Clubhouse temporary shelter. There is, of course, other places you can get information. There's a website. We'll be giving you those links in slides to come on this PowerPoint. But, you can go to toronto.ca, physically distancing shelters, and that will get you to a very fulsome set of documents and information about these temporary shelters. If anyone's having trouble connecting with the audio on this Webex platform, you can also find information about how to connect to this meeting on that project website for us, which is, again, toronto.ca, physical distancing shelters. So hopefully that makes it easier to get connected and see or hear the presentation. For accessibility, we will be describing the slides. We will be, if you require accommodation, the phone works a lot better than the video in this WebEx platform. That's where there's more adaptive technology available. So with those kind of introductory remarks, I'm going to turn it over officially to Alex Vamos. Alex Vamos is going to read a land acknowledgement, and Alex is the manager of planning and engagement, the planning and engagement team of shelter support and housing administration for the City of Toronto. Alex?
Thanks, Jane. We acknowledge that the land we are on is a traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13, signed with the Mississaugas of the Credit, and the Williams Treaty, signed with multiple Mississaugas and Chippewa bands.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you, Alex. All right, so next slide, please. I want you to know that the meeting is being recorded. Is part of a public record. The videotape of this meeting will be posted eventually on the project website, where it will also be closed captioned. And so you might want to think about, it's part of a permanent public record, and so don't share any personal information about yourself and other people, your name and address and contact information. If there is a private matter that you want to discuss, we're here, and you can contact us at our Gmail address, 556sherburne@gmail.com, as well as other contacts through the city website. We're here to listen if you need to talk about something of that nature. All right, next slide. Tonight we have a few presenters. I'm facilitating. Kristen Wong Tam, the City Councillor for Toronto Centre, is here, as well as Member of Provincial Parliament, Susie Morrison from Toronto Centre, Justin Lewis, who's the Director of Infrastructure Planning and Development with SSHA. Again, that's the Shelter Support and Housing Administration Department of the City of Toronto. And Bob Duff is here. He's the Executive Director of St. Simon's Clubhouse, the temporary shelter operation here. So that's who's on deck to tell you all about what's going to happen, answer questions. Next slide. And the agenda, as I said, is basically up to, more than 60 minutes, I'm sure we'll get to in Q&A. But there will be some welcome remarks and some presentations, probably eat up about 30, 40 minutes, some closing reflections and next steps. And of course, this is really the start of the community engagement work. I'll outline more in the presentation how other ways that we are engaging with the community, but tonight is the first big public event that way. Next slide. All right. Councillor Wong Tam, could you welcome the attendees and say a few things on behalf of the board?
Thank you so much, Jane, and all of you who are here and joining us tonight. I want to say thank you to you. You are spending some time with us to learn about a new city initiative, and I'm very glad that we are able to have this opportunity to present. For the participants, I just want to recognize that this has been a very difficult time. The COVID pandemic has changed just about everything that we do in the city. And although we're still living under the pandemics, I also want to just recognize that good work is being done. There have been a number of community emergency responses. I've seen neighbors reach out to one another, help each other with groceries, take care of the elderly and those who are less fortunate. And I think that really just captures the spirit of who we are as Torontonians here. The City of Toronto obviously has been in the grips of a housing crisis even before the COVID pandemic. Many of you, I know, recognize that. We may have had conversations in the community about what to do and how to find sustainable solutions. And I just want to let you know that the city has been working incredibly hard. It has been probably my time at City Hall the most difficult year that I've ever had. And I suspect that for many of you, it's been a very challenging year. And even if you're doing okay, there's others who are not, and we continue to think about them. I want to just speak a little bit about the housing crisis and what we're doing here tonight. Obviously, St. Simon's is a neighbor. They're actually not very far away from this particular location on Sherbourne, because we know them as neighbors just around the corner at Sherbourne and Bloor. So we know St. Simon's extremely well. We know the way they operate facilities and how they operate their service. And the fact that they treat their clients and their residents incredibly well. So I'm very pleased to know that St. Simon's is the selected operator here. I do want to acknowledge that, as we deal with the housing crisis, there's a few things that I want to focus on. One is that we've talked a lot about the pandemic from a health lens, but we also know that there are certain criteria when it comes to social determinants of health. Whether or not someone feels healthy, right? So therefore, if you can live a life free from violence, if you have pathways to education and pathways to career opportunities, you are probably going to be healthier than someone who does not. And interestingly enough, housing is one of the most powerful social determinants of health. And we can see right now in our city, there are many folks who have not been adequately housed. Those signs of poverty and the signs of homelessness literally are everywhere. And interestingly enough, the social determinants of health are almost identical to the social determinants of safety. So therefore, if you don't have access to education, you don't have a pathway to career, you don't live your life free from violence, you are going to be unsafe. And subsequently, the same thing applies to housing. When people are housed, they feel safe. And when we can eliminate poverty, I think we can all feel better. And at the end of the day, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to give people a pathway to housing. We want to be able to help stabilize them so that they can actually find their way to recovery, so they can be, number one, living their life with dignity, but also a contributing member of society, which I think we all strive to be. And since the pandemic, my office has worked with many city staff in the division, including the division that's here, represented by SSHA. Since the pandemic a year ago, we've moved over 1,300 people from encampments, living outdoors, to temporary hotels and shelters. Over 3,000 people have been permanently housed within a 12-month period, which is phenomenal numbers for those who follow housing work at the City of Toronto. We've also fast-tracked the construction of 220 affordable modular homes that are specifically geared to people who are living homeless and experiencing homeless. And we've also now built and offered opportunities to rapidly rehouse 12,000, sorry, not 12,000, I wish it was 12,000, 1,250 individuals. That is just 12 months worth of work. And clearly, I want to just say that hopefully it demonstrates to you that the City of Toronto prioritizes addressing the housing crisis, and that we're doing everything we can, and largely with the support of the community members who are fair-minded, who are compassionate, who truly care about their neighbor and the vulnerable. And it's because of you and your encouraging work that this work at the city continues. And we look forward to receiving partnerships and dollars. Of course, we can't do this work alone without the provincial or federal government. And I must say that the federal government has been exceptional to work with. They have opened up their coffers, and they have largely partnered with the city when it comes to building affordable housing. You're going to hear from my colleague and friend Ssha Morrison very shortly, and she'll tell you what she's doing at the province to give us some of those supports. I will just end up with this final note. Housing without supports for those who are vulnerable, who are living with mental illness or trying to recover from drugs and addictions is not going to work. We need housing with wraparound supports in order to stabilize people and keep them housed. So I offer you this. Our ally, Ssha Morrison, who's at the province, I think can tell you that she recognizes that housing with supports, which fall into the purview of the provincial government, mental health, healthcare, all within the purview and the wheelhouse of the provincial government, we need them to step up. And that has been one big missing piece from the city's housing strategy. And thank you very much, everyone, for being here. And thank you for the opportunity to welcome you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Okay, well, actually, it's a pretty good segue to our next person we're hoping to hear from, Ssha Morrison, Minister, a member of Provincial Parliament for Toronto Centre. Ms. Morrison, are you here on the phone? We're trying to determine if you are able to, or if you're here and able to speak now. You could raise your hand. We certainly want to unmute you. There's a couple of people, phone numbers. It's unclear who might that be, and maybe that is you. So if you are Ssha Morrison, raise your hand, and I believe you do that by pressing *3 if you're just on a phone, or indicating so we're not seeing anyone. So you know what? I think it might make sense to just see if Ssha shows up at some point, and then we will capture her comments at that time. Everyone knows we're all pretty busy, so it's understandable if she's not here right now. All right, we've gone through some of these points about the WebEx and accessibility. And again, I want to just say that we can do some accommodation. It's best done on the phone. We'll review some of this when it's time to do the Q&A. Next slide. And, you know, sort of a code of conduct. I think we all know how to do this, and, you know, share the space and be brief and limit ourselves to one question or a comment at a time. And to be good listeners, and, you know that there's many opportunities to engage and offer feedback and insights. Be patient, be respectful. We apologize in advance if there's technical issues. But we do want to say that the City of Toronto is an inclusive public organization, and racist or other forms of prejudicial, derogatory, or discriminatory comments and questions will not be tolerated. We do have that mute button, so that's a baseline, but I'm not expecting that to happen here tonight. We're really glad that we've got a number of people from the neighborhood. It looks like we have about 25, 30 people from the neighborhood, so we definitely have a nice crowd. So let's turn it over. Next slide, please, to get an overview of shelter services. Oh, the Q&A. Okay, again, you can raise hands, you can ask them verbally and on audio. We're going to review that when we get to the Q&A section, but it is something we'll be enabling the Q&A box. It is not on right now. It's accessible by computers because we want you to sort of focus on the presentation, but as soon as it's open, you'll type in a question. We'll just take questions and triage and try to get to everything in that box. And if you're on your phone, you'll be you can ask questions both on computer and audio by raising your hand and getting in that queue. So bear with us, but there's a number of ways to comment and ask questions. We'll review that again when we get there. Right now, let's throw to the next section, which is Justin Lewis of the City of Toronto. He's Director of Infrastructure Planning and Development with SSHA. All right, Justin, over to you.
Thanks, Jane. And if I could just get a thumbs up that you can hear me okay, my audio is still okay? Perfect. Thank you so much. And thank you, Councillor Wong-Tam, for your opening remarks this evening. Good evening, everyone. I want to take this time to welcome you all here to join us in hearing more about St. Simon's Clubhouse and the services and supports that are planned for that site. What I'm going to do tonight through this presentation is I'm going to walk you through and provide you with an overview of homelessness in Toronto and the services that Shelter Support and Housing Administration provides. We hope, the staff and I tonight, that this presentation will address some of the questions that you may have, and after the presentation, staff, myself, and others will be available to answer questions and respond to your concerns. Next slide, please. So the next slide that I'm going to go through just gives you a little bit of context of homelessness in Toronto. So SSHA's last street needs assessment in 2018 estimated that there were almost 9,000 people in Toronto who are homeless on any given night. 500 and more than 500 of them were staying outside. We will be updating these estimates in April of 2021 when we do our next street needs assessment. Homelessness has been on the rise since 2011, and we know that people are becoming homeless who are becoming homeless are staying in our shelters longer than they have in the past. We know that roughly 48% total are considered chronically homeless. For example, that would mean someone is homeless for 6 months or more in the past 1 year. Even before this pandemic, our system was running at capacity despite adding over 3,500 spaces in the last few years, which has almost doubled the size of our shelter system. Toronto's shelter system provides more than 6,000 spaces to support those experiencing homelessness and 2,300 spaces in new temporary shelter and hotel programs. We've experienced challenges in the shelter system, and they've been compounded by opioid crisis and pressures on the shelter system, which have been exacerbated due to COVID-19. While occupancy in the shelter system has decreased since the start of the pandemic, driven by a decline in the number of refugee claimants and families, capacity in the shelter system for single individuals is currently higher than the same period last year. Next slide, please. The next slide really gives you a depiction of the City of Toronto and through a ward map and programs that are located within communities. So Shelter Support and Housing Administration is the division at the city who manages the emergency shelter system. We oversee 56 shelters operated by skilled community agencies, and we directly operate 11 shelter programs. As you can see, availability of emergency shelters vary across the City of Toronto. Our knowledge and expertise and responsibilities is focused on 3 outcomes: providing people experiencing homelessness in Toronto access to safe, high-quality emergency shelter. People are provided housing-focused supports that ensure homelessness is rare, brief, and non-reoccurring. And low-income households have access to high-benefit programs that provide affordability and stability. Providing emergency shelter for people who are experiencing homelessness is an important community service that is offered across the city. Sites are located within communities, which means that they are often located near other community services like childcare centers, schools, and parks. Shelters are located within communities not only because it's important for people staying at these locations to be connected with their community, but shelters are also allowed in areas that are zoned as residential or mixed commercial residential use. We cannot open a shelter in areas zoned as industrial. Next slide, please. So the next slide that I'm going to run through really quickly is the city's COVID-19 response for people experiencing homelessness. So I know that everyone recognizes that these are extraordinary times, and as such, requires us to deploy unique solutions. Since mid-March, the City of Toronto has taken, mid-March of 2020, the City of Toronto has taken urgent action to achieve physical distancing in our shelter system in accordance with the Ministry of Health guidance for congregate living settings and to save lives and protect vulnerable people who are at greater risk of COVID-19 related harms. We have opened 40+ new temporary sites to create physical distancing in the shelter system. Currently, at least 25 locations are active across the city. 3,611 people moved for physical distancing to distancing sites, hotels, and housing. Close to 2,300 of these spaces have been in new temporary shelters and hotel programs. As of January 2021, 3,229 people moved into permanent housing through rapid rehousing initiative, housing allowances, and rent geared to income. Our winter service plan adds approximately 680 additional spaces, including temporary, seasonal spaces, and permanent housing. Next slide, please. The next slide explains the temporary shelter programs that have been activated in response to COVID-19 by ward. This map shows the 40+ facilities across Toronto that have been opened and closed as a part of our COVID-19 response. The programs that have closed are the temporary programs we opened in community centers at the onset of the pandemic. They closed as the city transitioned into phase 2 of recovery so that summer programming could commence. Given the number of sites that we needed, the city conducted an exhaustive search for space. We received inquiries and referrals from hotel operators, property managers, community members, developers, and landlords. The city is continuously reviewing its portfolio of temporary shelters to achieve physical distancing in the shelter system. As part of these ongoing efforts, the city secured St. Simon's Clubhouse as a new temporary shelter. Next slide, please. The next slide gives an explanation around shelter programs downtown. So there has been an overall reduction of shelter capacity in the downtown core by 829 beds in the past year, even with the addition of temporary hotel programs. As a result of physical distancing measures, the number of shelter beds in downtown Toronto has actually decreased by 829 beds. Within that, Ward 13 has seen the number of shelter beds decreased by 333 beds. Additional relocation and bed closures are planned for Ward 13 in 2021, including relocations as part of the George Street Revitalization Project. The COVID-19 interim shelter recovery strategy identifies 12 priority actions for the next 12 months, including actions to invest in housing and supports to decrease the volume and duration of need for emergency shelters. Next slide, please. The next slide gives an overall idea or criteria for selecting a shelter location. So many of you have asked how we make decisions on the sites that are selected for a new shelter. And so I'd like to spend a few minutes just sharing that information, and I really hope it's helpful. People experiencing homelessness experience homelessness for many reasons. Any one of us could experience homelessness. Each person in our shelter system was once a child with hopes and dreams that did not include growing up to be homeless. Our goal is to ensure that there are services in all neighborhoods so that as much as possible, people can stay within their communities, maintain their employment, and stay connected with their friends, family, and if they're experiencing homelessness. Some things we comply with are city bylaws and the Toronto Housing Charter. We work with our real estate division, allowing them to source potential properties based on criteria we provide them. And once the potential property meets the zoning requirements, it's identified, we assess the suitability of the location for its access to transit and other services in the community, such as libraries, public parks, pharmacies, and healthcare services. In 2017, City Council delegated the authority to open new sites to staff. This means that sites are secured prior to commencing community engagement. In normal process, we engage within communities after the site is secured and approximately 6 months before a site opens. And the focus of the engagement is the integration of the new program into the community. Next slide, please. The next slide provides a little additional criteria for the site selection during COVID-19. During the pandemic, we had implemented innovative ways to respond quickly. Our goals saved lives and ensure the healthcare system did not become overwhelmed. We conducted an exhaustive search for locations. In looking for temporary locations rather than permanent locations, we focused on spaces that were more or less turnkey ready for operations with minimal retrofits required. We looked for sites that would adequately allow us to meet physical distancing guidelines. We looked for sites that were available right away, and we also looked for sites that were close to transit and accessible. Next slide, please. The next slide, I just want to give a little overview of St. Simon's Clubhouse. The St. Simon's Clubhouse is opened on February 22nd, 2021 to clients as a part of the city's COVID-19 response. The city leased this property until February of 2022 with the potential for extension as public health guidance changes. 36 single rooms will be made available to be filled gradually, ramping up to full capacity over time. St. Simon's has a long-standing relationship in the neighborhood as the operator of a shelter at 525 Bloor Street East for the last 20 years. The service at 525 Bloor Street East is not able to occupy its current facility beyond May 2021, so a new location is required. There are currently 18 residents at the Bloor Street East shelter, and that's down from the 65 due to physical distancing measures. So that's just a little overview, and then I'll pass it back over to Jane. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you very much, Justin. Of course, we'll be hearing a lot about St. Simon's Clubhouse when Bob Duff speaks. But Bob, I just want to get you to hold for a second because MPP Suze Morrison is here now, and we'd like to give her the mic, and delighted she's here and have a few words of welcome and some remarks. So Carolyn, if you can unmute Suze Morrison. And we can see if we can get Suze on the screen too, as well as Suze. Can you say hello?
Hi, can you hear me? I don't know if you can. I don't think you can see me though.
Have you got your video on?
I don't have the option to turn my video
Okay,
on.
that's right. You're in the participant. Okay, so we can hear you. Justin, I see you. Can you hear Suze? Yeah, great.
Okay, well, I don't have too much to say. I certainly apologize for joining late. There was a bit of a miscommunication with my staff. I didn't think it started until 7. So
Not a problem.
I've unfortunately missed most of the presentation, but I popped on a few minutes ago. But certainly happy to be here and listen.
Well, Suze, I should say that Councillor Wong Tam was very complimentary and very glowing about the collaborations that are happening at multiple levels of government. So that was a really nice shout out at very least. So please carry on.
Well, the feeling is certainly mutual. I know I'm very fortunate as a provincial representative to have such a strong municipal partner to work with. I know it's certainly not always the case, so I feel very, very lucky here in Toronto Centre to have Councillor Wong Tam as a partner in crime, if you will. Certainly you're eager to better understand how I can better advocate for supports from the province to support the municipality to do the important work that you're doing to, address the homelessness and housing crisis here in the city. However I can help advocate to the province to do that really important work that you folks are leading, certainly happy to do that. So thanks for bringing us all together, and pleased to be here.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here. All right. Let's now we have some technical challenges to reach Bob here. Bob is having some Wi-Fi capacity issues, I believe, but he is here by audio. Bob, can you say hello?
Hello, folks. Can you hear me?
There you go. That's Bob Duff. He's St. Simon's Clubhouse Executive Director. Now, Bob, I think the way we're going to do, we can hear you loud and clear, is there's going to be slides that you can see, and you'll speak to them. And if there's any gap there, I'll just break in and say, oh, the slide we're looking at right now, Bob, is this. Does that sound okay?
That sounds spot on, Jay.
All right. I'm dying to call you Kitten, but I know we're at a public meeting now. I'm a big fan.
I always wish to remain one of your kids. Let me express that and attest to that in the first hand.
All right, Bob, the floor is yours.
Well, I'm looking at slide number 17.
Fabulous.
And that's when I think Justin spoke to it, and it highlights that, yes, our existing shelter is currently 18 beds. Just to provide folks with how dramatic the impact has been due to COVID, this shelter was 66 beds. Then we reduced to 45. Then we reduced to 30. And then we reduced to 18. And that was the continuous process of mitigating and working towards ensuring that our very vulnerable folks that we work for, and folks, those are our community members that are homeless, marginalized, and obviously at even greater risk than a number of us who are adequately housed. And COVID is a non-discriminating lover. It can visit any one of us in our community at any given time. So I applaud the efforts of our municipality and other levels of government to work for us and with us to steer us through this challenge. Anyway, so we are landing at a new location, which is basically within a 3-minute walk. I'm looking at the slide. It's a old Victorian mansion that was built in 1891.
Right.
And
it says our residence on the top?
I am just looking at, I'm looking at the St. Simon's Clubhouse. Our residence.
That's right. Okay, next slide, Suhal. Great.
Okay, I'm looking at slide number 20, folks, our residence.
Perfect.
So the shelter, the St. Simon's Clubhouse, will provide services to adults who identify as male. All of our pre-existing residents from the pre-existing shelter have been transitioned over to the new location and significantly improving what I believe will be over the longer run material and social determinants of health and outcomes. So thank you to our Councillor Wong Tam for identifying absolutely crucial. The 18 existing beds at 525 Bloor Street are planned to shut down no later than May 31st, 2021. So we covered off how we had to shrink, and I just want to give one piece of history to this new location or additional location, and that is the mansion part was built in 1891. The hotel portion, that's 7 stories, was added in 1914. And so within that, we're going to be delivering the wraparound envelope of services for residents, and very integral here, very key for all of us as community members. It will be exclusively at this time for residents of the St. Simon's Clubhouse only. So, should we go on to the next slide?
Yeah, absolutely. Just describe the slide. I think it's the program goals. Or rights.
No, it's rights and responsibilities.
Yep, you're right.
Rights and responsibilities has a definitive history to it through the ongoing work of the evolution of provision of services for our most vulnerable individuals. And so shelter residents, and they are equal citizens of the city and have the same inalienable rights, freedoms, responsibilities as any other resident. And integral, they have a right to a safe, secure shelter that is a welcoming program. And within that, we also always, and at our existing location, we have what we refer to as policies, procedures, rules, expectations, and guidelines. And it's expected that our residents will follow these when remaining with us. And specific to that site also in following up on what we would refer to as a good neighbors policy, there will be 24/7 management staff on duty at all times, and they will be there one-on-one upon intake for our service users into the program to review this and to remind our service users of the rules, policies, and guidelines. And just to give folks a very brief example, on Friday afternoon, I was at the new site, and we have one of our service users. I can't share his surname because of privacy. Darren. Darren is a young male, approximately 23 years of age. I think he might be perhaps assessed as being somewhat developmentally delayed. Just a lovely, kind, gentle human being. And yes, he did have a can of Laker, and I expressed to Darren, I said, "Oh, Darren, did you not know we have full implementation of harm reduction, so you have the right to, within the privacy of your own room, safely partake of a can of beer, be it whatever."
Mm-hmm.
And I just expressed to him, and he totally understood. And I said, we're doing our utmost because we live in this community. This is our neighborhood. This is our home. We're all part of it. And I said, good neighbors. And I said, we kind of do that within the confines of our own settings as best as possible. Totally understood it and was quite proud. And folks, you might think of this as being perhaps a little anecdotal, and he's very pleased to the next day come in with 4 cans, show them to us, and immediately progress up into his room. So I think there's an example of that's being a good neighbor. That's being supportive of our service users, and that's what we're going to be about. So we just, there's a small, and it's just a smidgen of what we do, what we've done historically, and what we'll continue to do. So if we could, I guess, move on to the next slide. Program goals.
Yep, absolutely.
Well, I'll express this, folks, and I'm sure that there was a brief period of time that I had a year off, and I actually worked on contract for the Department of National Defense, and that was in the very early 90s. And that's when PowerPoint was just becoming very avant-garde, and we used to express, pardon this piece, and that is death by PowerPoint. So I'm not going to read verbatim, but obviously it is to provide safe space and the stabilizing supports for our service users and many who have been currently living outside, sleeping in the rough, and that obviously challenging in and of itself to their overall emotional, mental health, and physical well-being. Piece being, we're going to focus on working with our service users, and that's building some of the very essential life skills, supporting emotional and mental health and physical health. And some of it, right now we're a little restricted due to COVID, but an example would be a Steps to Success program, because many of our folks, through no fault of their own, have been sleeping in the rough, have been underhoused, inadequately housed, or in shelter, and they've lost some of the primary basic life skills, like, and I don't wish for anyone to minimize this, but how to turn on a stove and boil a couple of eggs, how to live and figure out how to survive and live and adequately feed yourself on a very limited, constrained budget. and then build a strong sense of community, and that's within our shelter and externally. And a key piece to within our shelter, it is a community. It's a small town. It's a small ward, and we're all neighbors within. And within that, if we support that internally, then there is obviously the representative presentation in that when any of our service users cross the threshold onto the sidewalk within our community. And just to create programming opportunities that engage our surrounding community and shelter residents together. And we have an example here at our existing shelter. We have a neighbor, and I can share his first name, Marshall. And Marsh has been our neighbor for 20 plus years. And Marsh is involved in real estate and does a significant amount of household renovation. And he's worked with us, and we've worked with him where we've had, through the years, several service users while residing with us, working with Marsh, receiving basically the equivalent of a, call it an honorarium, reacquiring those skills they may have lost, building confidence, and developing what I call an employment-ready employment hygiene. And that is, we report to work on time, we follow instructions, and et cetera. And it's been tremendous. Our neighbor has been very appreciative, and we've had several of our service users who, because of that, and meeting other contractors and interfacing them, that have gone on to permanent full-time employment. And that's one of the pieces that I think is integral. And there's an example where it enriches the lives of our residents. And we also work with our residents in order to, there are tremendous opportunities through volunteering at United Way agencies, of which we have over 200 in the city of Toronto. And that is on a volunteer basis at a daycare center, at a seniors program. Also, a few have moved forward to become members of the United Way Speakers Bureau, where they present and speak on what it is to be homeless, the sense of homelessness, and assisting and educating our broader community about it, and raising public awareness, and also, once again, reinforcing that our community is doing. We are making a difference, and I think we cannot lose sight or hope of that, because, yes, it can become overwhelming at times. And I just think the positive outcomes and the celebration. So part of the things we do, and like point one, provide safe space, it would be, we're like an emergency room. We triage folks, and immediately upon referral to us through central intake, and we assess, and start the process to identify what supports will this person be in need of to help to mitigate, and basically I'd say to assist in breaking the vicious cycle of homelessness. And the vicious cycle of homelessness can be extremely similar to the vicious cycle of addiction. And I want to share a story of one of ours that's here. A gentleman, Tibor G. Tibor made his way to Canada after the wall came down in Eastern Europe. He made his way out of East Germany and Czechoslovakia into Hungary. And in Hungary, he found a bit of a home and found employment, worked in the hospitality trade. And obviously was exposed and got to see a lot of Westerners, and developed a desire to come, perhaps I'd say, to go west. And he came west. He came to Canada. And he found employment quite expeditiously in the hospitality trade. He's a pastry chef. And unfortunately for Tibor, he developed an addiction. And his addiction was gambling. And unfortunately, Tibor would go for the cycle of being adequately housed, having somewhat of a degree of savings, and then gambling, and he would become homeless. And he came to us one day, referred to us, and we worked with Tibor, and he started to put himself back together again. But it wasn't easy. I can express this. It was a 4-year process, and he did transition out, and then unfortunately the addiction to gambling overcame him again, and he became homeless again, but returned to us. And then we worked with Tibor, and we worked on harm reduction with Tibor, and we recognized that one of the supports we were to provide Tibor is a trust management fund, and that is his earnings, the percentage would be held in trust. So he developed prudent spending habits. We also worked with Tibor to identify alternatives for social recreation to gambling. And we worked with Tibor to identify what it was that the addiction of gambling provided him. And I think it's identical to addiction, chasing a high, a hole that there was something empty. The good news is, folks, Tibor is more than adequately housed. He's gainfully employed. He's never looked back. And he is an excellent pastry chef, and he returns to shelter. He actually, we had a shelter baking class that Tibor operated for our residents, and they would provide a pastry snack at the end for snack at 10 o'clock at night, and residents were involved. And he also provides us, when we've done our gala fundraising events here at the shelter for with our supporters, his strudels are remarkable. So there's an example. Tibor's been returned to us as a fully participating member of our community. The only reason that happened is that there was a shelter, and there was a bed, and it was safe. One of the things we do, we hold, prior to COVID, town hall meetings every 2 weeks with our service users, and that's just to identify what we're hearing from our community, to address any issues of concern. And I'll just provide one other quick one. I know Jane is probably looking at a watch, and this is one, and this is very recent. This is actually 5 weeks ago. We have a service user. His name is Anthony. Staff observed that Anthony's foot, and he was developing a limp, and in identifying that, and he was expressing a degree of discomfort with his lower limb, right limb, and staff observed that his foot was becoming discolored. We called EMS. They attended. Anthony was transported to Mount Sinai Hospital. Within 6 hours, he was transported to Toronto General. Bypass surgery was performed. He would have been gone. However, that intervention, and Anthony has been returned to us, is in the process of rehabilitating, recuperating, and Anthony's alive today because our community, and that's each individuated Torontonian, has been there supporting and understanding why there's the need for shelters for our very vulnerable. I think we can go on to the next slide.
All righty. This is your last slide. Excellent information, Bob. We want to make sure we're leaving time for lots of Q&A.
Okay. I've never been renowned to be extremely brief, and so I've always need to be gently reminded. Thank you, James. Thank you.
I'm going to work on that.
Okay. Okay, just the essentials, obviously. We have 2 security guards that are posted 24/7. And that's to respond to security issues that may arise internally, and it's also to conduct patrols within reason outside. And when I say that, we have a separate entity for that. But that site, and thank you to the City of Toronto, we have a very robust camera monitoring system in real time, so we can be hands-on in ensuring the safety and security and integrity of not only our occupied site, but for our neighbors within our immediate periphery. And I think that's remarkable, and I applaud SSHA and infrastructure. Justin, your team has just been remarkable, and I think it should be acknowledged. We have 2 community safety team members that are on duty 12 hours a day, 10 to 10. They patrol in the immediate area, and I think the periphery is Sherburne Street up to Bloor Street on the north side, and then over to Jarvis Street on our west side, and down to below Isabella. And we've identified specific areas that they're paying particular attention to, and of course one of them is we have our small parkette close to us. We have 2 schools within our immediate proximity. We have the Wellesley Center, and they are active. They have two-way radio communication with the shelter in real time, so we can respond. And there are eyes and ears, and they're available, and there's contact information. I don't have it off the top of my head at this moment, but I'm sure that is readily available for folks to have access to it. The other pieces that we've committed to is that we're engaging with our community, our neighbors. Our neighbors are part and parcel of community safety, and that's integral. And of course, good neighborship, good neighbor policy, and neighbors will be part and parcel of that, and we respond to it, we acknowledge it, and that is some of the key pieces just to, as far as community safety also overall, for all our staff are trained to respond to immediate non-law enforcement and non-EMS related issues, and that's specific to obviously first aid, CPR, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They're trained in crisis intervention, de-escalation skills or intervention, and that means working with folks and speaking with them and being able to hear them and ensuring their safety and the safety of all. There'll be a minimum of 3 shelter staff on duty at all time. That's shelter staff attached to Clubhouse. That's 7/24. There will be times throughout a 24-hour period. There'll be more staff. There'll be a member of our management team on site 24/7, and that is specific to acknowledge, log, and respond to any community concerns that are addressed to us, and to obviously respond to that accordingly and to acknowledge it. And what we've expressed is that obviously if it's a critical concern, it accordingly will be mitigated as quickly as possible. We have expressed that we will acknowledge all concerns and complaints, and they will be responded to within 72 hours. And that's our commitment to, we want to hear from our community. We need to hear from our community because that's part of the process.
Excellent.
So,
and of course, the phone number to reach the community safety team is there on the slide as well, 647-688-8927. We'll be making that available in bulletins and so on, but that's an excellent roundup. Bob, I think I'd like to kind of move forward. Is there anything else before I'm going to talk about community engagement more now?
I think you're spot on, Jane, and thank you. And I'll take my reprieve.
Awesome. I'm sure we'll be coming back to you for questions during the Q&A.
You'll probably have to mute me now.
I think that will be something Carolyn does. All right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Bob.
You're welcome.
Just a quick overview of some of the community engagement activities as it pertains to this exact site. We are engaging, of course, during COVID-19, which makes it an unusually tight sort of timeline, as you would know, in the neighborhood. But we've outlined some of it already, but the box there on the right that says actions currently underway, there's an engagement team of which I am the lead. We're tracking community concerns. We've done some phone briefings and outreach. This information session, which was advertised widely in a flyer drop in the neighborhood, as well as in community bulletins. But we'll be making community bulletins. If you sign up for them, you can receive them. That simply sort of answer concerns and you know, report on the process of integrating and you know, transitioning the residents into the community, and updates on community safety planning and so on. So there is also the Gmail account. You can see there, 556sherburne@gmail.com. That's where you can reach us all the time. And next slide, please. I'd like to talk about the Community Liaison Committee. Some of you may be familiar with these bodies. They're basically a volunteer committee that is populated by individuals from the community who represent organizations like residents associations, BIAs, you know, church groups, schools, things like that. People that report to a wider community and network. It meets regularly, maybe about once a month. They tend to sort of be busy in the ramp up part of a shelter, but they can go on for a while if the need is there in the community. The focus here is to create a place where St. Simon's staff and City Toronto staff and the engagement facilitator, myself, are sharing a space with community in order to bring issues forward, share information, and address community concerns, as well as channeling offers of support. We need to hear from the community basically if this is something of interest. We can certainly make it available, but it's a volunteer body and it requires people to step forward from organizations who would want to be part of this. Get in touch with us. We'll probably advertise this, of course, in a community bulletin, but it's driven by the desire from the community. So we're sort of eager to hear from you if that's something of interest. Next slide. Again, the meeting is being recorded. Again, we're getting to the Q&A part. I'll give you some more details. So again, don't you know, share personal information while during this meeting. It's pretty impossible to scrub it from the meeting recording. Next slide. So the Webex Basics. Okay, you're seeing a slide that has, you know, sort of some arrows where on the screen. Basically, if you're on a computer, you can ask a question two different ways. You can raise your hand. There's a little icon on the right side. You see the little hand icon. You just press that and your hand goes up. We know that you want to speak, you want to make a comment, you want to ask a question. All right, and then you'll be asked to take your hand down after, so we know you're not in the queue again. So that's if you're on a computer. If you're on a phone, you can raise your hand as well by pressing *3. Okay. That alerts us that you have a question, so *3 or press the hand button. But you can also, if you're on your computer, not on your phone, if you're on your computer, you can chat, you can type a question into the Q&A box, okay? It'll be addressed to, there it is, it's now live, and we have a question already from one participant. And we want you to put your questions in there, but we're going to direct them to staff, take them kind of in one by one, and direct them to the right person on the panelists. And you've heard from Justin, of course, who presented as the Director of Infrastructure Planning and Development. Bob Duff from St. Simon's just spoke. Brad Boucher who's also from SSHA, City of Toronto, may be brought in to help support with answers. Councillor Wong Tam is here. She's available for questions. And so, as well as Sergeant Henry Dick, actually, he's with the 51 Division, and he's the police services representative here. So he is able to also answer questions. So again, on a computer, you got the Q&A box, or you can raise your hand. And if you're on your phone, you raise your hand by dialing *3. and we'll get you in a queue according to how you arrived, the order, and we'll get to as many questions as possible. So next slide might go through, I think I've pretty much covered this. Let's get going. If your questions can't be answered during this session, if there's too many, they will be answered through a follow-up FAQ and community bulletins. Okay, so if we don't get to them, and we are listening, and we'll get to that content in a community bulletin, which you can sign up for at the project email, which is again 556sherburne@gmail.com. That's on the project website as well. All right. Next slide, please. I think I've covered how to ask questions, raise your hand, and we're ready to go to the question and answer period. All right. And so, yeah, I think we could actually go to a series of faces, the panelists that people can see if they're on computer, as a way to make it just a little bit more human. There you go. So there's a bunch of people here from the City of Toronto. There's more people than you'll probably hear from, but this is the team that's bringing you that's here to answer questions. Okay, so shall we start with a question that's in the Q&A box? I believe so. We don't have any hands up at the moment, I don't believe.
We do have a hand up.
We have one hand up. Okay, well, listen, why don't we start with the Q&A question in any case, because it was there from the beginning. And that question concerns the hotel itself. Someone's wondering if the hotel is permanently closed and if the shelter doesn't renew its lease in 2022, of January 2022, does it mean that the property is ripe for other development? Now, I think I'll just throw that to Justin, but Bob might, Brad may have some information on that too. Justin, do you have, can you answer that question about whether the hotel is permanently closed and whether if the lease is not renewed by St. Simon's, does it mean the property will be ripe for development?
Sure, Jane, I can, and I think it's a good question. I think right now, to speak to that, I can only speak to what we know currently, and what we know is that we do have a lease in place at the location until February of 2022. However, that is also dependent on the restrictions and guidelines that are put in place for the pandemic. What happens with the property thereafter is really up to the hotel owner, as we are just a tenant in the space right now, or a tenant in the space right now. So again, we can't really say what's going to happen in the future, but we do know that the lease is in place till February 2022.
Terrific. Okay, I hope that answers the question. If not, throw another prompt into the Q&A box. Councillor Wong Tam, do you want to add to that?
Yes, thank you very much, and thank you for the question. For those who follow the planning process, many of you will recognize that under the Planning Act, property owners have the right, and it's enshrined, the right to seek changes to their property. So if there is going to be any change to the property, meaning a change in the zoning or the change in the physical built form, the structure itself, it will have to go through a planning process, meaning an application will be submitted to the city, and then there will be a community consultation process. As far as I can tell you, that I have not received, nor do I believe the planning staff have received any inquiries from the property owner, the owner-operator of the hotel, to seek any changes for future use of the building or alterations to the building. That's as of today. I can't tell you what's going to happen in the future, but if they do come forward with the intention or a plan to redevelop, you will be notified, and we will then move that through a planning process, which everyone will get an invitation to. So I can offer you that. They haven't come to City Hall. There's been no indication that they are seeking any rezoning application or changes to the building.
Excellent, thank you. I'm going to take another question from the Q&A box because, Carolyn, I can't actually see the participant list. We'll see if we can troubleshoot that one. So
Jane, if you ask me, I can unmute and introduce the person, no problem.
Okay, good. All right. Oh, I see. It's MM there. Okay, Carolyn, let's have a live question from the phone or computer.
Sure. So MM, I'm going to unmute you. MM, you're unmuted.
Hello, thank you for unmuting me. Hi, Jane. Thanks
Hi,
for moving.
MM.
Thanks for moving the meeting along. I'm sorry I just gave my initials.
Okay, no problem.
Okay, so you kind of touched on this already. I just wanted some clarification on the date. So I'm hearing February 2022, and then I also heard a shutdown at May 31st, 2021.
Yeah.
Possible extension. I just wanted some clarification on those dates regarding the homelessness.
Okay, excellent question. Thank you. It might be a Bob question there. There's just some confusion around the dates. Bob, you're in? How long you staying? What's the other June date about?
No, it's the May 31st date is when the shelter at 525 Bloor Street is closing because our lease is up.
Yeah.
So
in
that's the
some
one.
ways, it doesn't really affect the operations at 556 Sherburne because that is separate. So one St. Simon operation is closing. This one is now open and carry on.
And yes, the other one is continuing to operate. And as Justin referred to, that the lease is through to, I believe it's February 2022.
So is that the hotel? Like when will the homelessness shelter close at the hotel? Is that May 31st, or is that February 2022?
No, it's February 2022.
It's a year-long lease. It's a temporary shelter operation, and that's the plan at present. All right, MM? That's all we know for now.
Jane, if I could just add to that, that is also dependent on the restrictions and guidelines around the pandemic. So we will revisit that as we go, as needed. But for now, the lease is in place until February of 2022, and the other location will close in May.
Thank you for that clarification. Okay, great. I do see now that there are other hands up, but I'm going to go back to the Q&A box for another question. A person here asks, that says that there are 2 security persons for inside the shelter for the 37 residents. Are these security people going to be patrolling the area, and if so, to what extent? Bob, can you answer that question, please?
No. Yes, I can. Those 2 security officers that are with us 24/7 are specific to the internal part of the building, and obviously it's the 2 community safety team members that are external to the building that are providing the oversight of the area that's geographically, like physically next door to us and over to Sherburne Street up to Bloor. And that is what is provided for at this current time.
Sounds good. All right, there's some clarity. Let's go back to Carolyn to unmute another Carolyn with a hand up.
Sure. So Caroline B, I'm unmuting you. You're unmuted, Caroline.
Hello, thank you. I have a similar question to the one just answered. We have an increasing presence of homeless individuals in the area just west of the area that was described as being monitored or will be monitored. And I was wondering 2 things. One of them is it going to be all current service users from the previous location being moved to the new location, or will there be any new individuals that might become coming on to be service users at this new location? And then the second question is, with the monitoring area, that's the 2 community safety members, was it that they were only patrolling 12 hours? And what are the hours? And I also wonder if the area might be extended further west to Church.
Thank you. I think, Bob, can you speak to that?
I'll do my utmost. One, that is a good question in so much as that 18 of the existing service users, shelter residents at 525 Bloor, have been transferred over to Clubhouse. And so, and we're commencing with intake here at 525 Bloor to provide those existing 18 beds until the end of May. And we obviously will do an intake to fill the other 18 rooms at Clubhouse, bringing it up to a total of 36. And just, I think, equally important, we've actually been in operation at Clubhouse since Monday, February 22nd, and it's been a graduated what we call ramp up. And the whole piece behind graduated ramp up is, once again, just to allow individuals to settle, for us to work with them, to get them properly introduced, oriented, and then obviously that will continue in that process on a graduated basis until we reach the number of 36. So, and we've found that it's been positive to date. I guess, you know, there was something that I missed that I'll speak to it under community engagement if that's a topic that comes up again. So it is true, yes, the community safety team individuals are on duty from 10 o'clock in the morning till 10 at night, 7 days a week.
Okay, great. Thanks, Bob.
You're welcome.
Bob, you might as well keep your mic on, because I think the next question that we're going to take from the Q&A box is also one for you. It concerns the services being offered inside the shelter. Specifically, someone is asking, I heard that there's going to be wraparound services at the site, but what exactly are those services? Bob, can you tell us what services are being offered to the residents?
Yes, excellent question. Well, first and foremost, as part of the package overall, wraparound, primary health care services, because we have an attendant resident physician that's being provided to us through Inner City Health Associates. And he'll be providing primary health care support, obviously mental health well-being support as needed and necessary. 2, focused housing worker to work with folks in the process of, you know, moving forward with what's needed to be in place for someone to consider housing, to work with the person in identifying what type of housing would be the appropriate next step. 2, working with the individual to ensure the appropriate support documents are in place for that. And 3, to obviously continue on once one of our service users is successfully housed or rehoused to provide for follow-up to work towards mitigating prevention of eviction. 2, social rec and ed. Right now we're somewhat limited because of COVID. But also social rec and ed within the facility, family reunification. And I just, this is essential. We have a number of folks who originated from other communities within Ontario, with Oshawa, whatever, and there's been a divide, and obviously the chance to work with an individual to facilitate a safe form of return to their community of origin, based on the reality that that is their desire, and that it's clear and transparent that the outcomes will be, their outcomes will be dramatically improved. The primary basics of just being adequately fed, your nutritional needs met. I can share this, that, and I've always said that in our sector that ground zero, a hungry person is an angry individual, and you don't even have the first step to start to work with that fellow human being to peel away the layers of the onion just to start the process. Adequate personal hygiene, employment support, obtaining documents. Key piece, and I can't say the name of the bank because you know, we don't advertise on behalf of whether it's CIBC or TD. We actually have a relationship with our local branch that we have an account with. They have gone so far that they've attended our shelter, unfortunately not COVID-19, where they shut the branch down and 3 staff persons did a blitz to ensure that our folks had bank accounts opened and waived some of the requirements for immediate identification based on the shelter being able to attest to the reality that their identification has been affirmed, and starting the whole process of money management skills.
All right.
Counselor, I can go on the list, but it's wrap around because I don't want to make it sound like it's we're trying to achieve something that's called one-stop shopping, in so much as that if we lose someone, they leave the shelter, and it's like you have to go to the corner of University and Bloor to see for some counseling and considering getting into addiction treatment. It's like trying to it's telling someone, we wish for you to walk to the moon. We're going to lose the person in that initiative. And I could go on in greater detail. Hopefully this somewhat provides an answer.
That's great, Bob. It certainly is interesting. And I actually have to apologize to the person who asked the last question. I was focused on getting to the next question. And you know what? You hadn't actually answered the second part of that, which I'd like to get you to do now, Bob, if you can, which is the part about the community safety team area and being extended west to Church Street. Do you have some information about that? I apologize for that.
Oh, no issues at all. That is actually and a very timely and good question. We're not committing to anything at this point. This is a bit of a process, and it is currently, I know, been brought to our SSHA, and it's being given some very adequate and due consideration. So I can't speak on behalf of SSHA, nor would I ever dare to, just to say very timely, because there was a conversation today that I know prima facie arose speaking to that. So somebody must be very perceptive or certainly have very good insight. So I thank you for the question, and I express this. I'm sure there'll be information that will be provided back, which will provide the additional clarity as to whether that is a possibility, or if it's not, the reasons and rationale as to why.
Okay, great. Thank you. Councillor Wong-Tam, do you want to add something there?
Actually, I want to invite Sergeant Henry Dick to speak to the issue around community safety. Obviously, we recognize that it's not always going to be a police response, but we do have the community safety team that St. Simons is deploying. But when you do need a police response, and I think it's very appropriate for the police to speak up at this point. So Henry, go over to you, please.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. You know, it's difficult to comment on what you don't have in place. So I will just say, if it makes anybody feel any better, I'm not concerned about the residents of St. Simons. We've had very few radio calls for service from that location over the last 5 years. They've been excellent neighbors. So I really have very, very little concern about that, and I'm sure that we'll run a good program. I'll be honest, I have some concerns about people that may be referred from 129 Peter there for the other beds that are available. We'll just have to take that as it comes, because we don't know who they will be or where they will be coming from. There have been a number of concerns as of late from the neighbors in the area with regards to some of the larger apartment buildings in the area have been complaining to the councillor's office and to us as well about unwanted guests in their building and people using narcotics in their stairwell and trespassing and so forth. So we're going to have to monitor that very closely. One of the benefits that we do have for this area that not all people have in the city of Toronto is that we do have dedicated neighborhood community officers that are posted for just this area. And so they will work closely with the site. And if the community is recognizing that there are some issues in the area, then I will be making sure that our neighborhood community officers for the area are engaged so that we can find appropriate solutions to whatever situations may arise.
Thank you. Thank you, Sergeant Dick. There is a question in the Q&A box that concerns whether you want to know whether the shelter is open to other service users, like if it has sort of maybe a drop-in type function, or is it strictly the residents of the shelter, and can these residents leave the shelter in the morning and spend the day outside? I think they also would then be asking implicitly, do they have to leave? Are they able to stay inside if they want to? Bob, can you tell us how that works? They may have some technical challenges. Is Bob there? Is Bob able to answer? If Bob is not able to answer, Justin,
Hello?
can I? Oh,
Bob is here. Yep.
Yeah.
okay,
Sorry.
Bob.
Yes, residents are allowed to remain on site 24/7. Residents can leave the shelter, but we do have guidelines and protocol in place. Like, for example, a resident, we do have 2 curfew times. One is at 11 o'clock at night, which is a soft curfew that if you're not going to be able to make it in by then, you reach out to us. And then there's a much harder curfew that's at 1 o'clock in the morning. And part of that is to ensure that beds are not going fallow. And it's also part of the process to ensure the safety and well-being of our residents. They can apply for an overnight pass. Specific on certain conditions, and that is meeting the requirements and setting goals and meeting some of those goals within their case management plan. We would like to, and COVID right now is challenging, so I will express this. We are not unreceptive to our residents remaining to a degree housebound, and that just works towards mitigating and minimizing and supporting safe distancing and exposure or potential exposure. So we also, and I think this is a key point within this, and Sergeant, I'm sure a community policing sergeant would have total understanding of it. We have a very robust safety and wellness plan, in so much that rooms are checked 3 hours a day. Now, we don't knock on doors at nighttime. We just open the door to ensure that a resident's on site. Residents log in and log out as they depart the building and enter the building, and that's part of the overall life safety plan that, heaven forbid, if there was a fire alarm pulled, we can almost immediately, based on our Smith's list and the log in, log out, assess just how many real folks are on site, how many are off site, and that's integral to exiting the building safely. So that's part of it. And certainly we promote folks that are in need of other specialized services. Of course, they should be able to leave the building and have the right to access services when they return.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Bob.
You're welcome.
There's a question in the Q&A box about the fact that there's a restaurant attached to the facility. I believe we know that there's Gabby's, as well as a park a stone's throw away from the hotel, the question reads. And has there been any consideration to these factors? I'd like to ask Justin to weigh in on the site selection aspect of that, the proximity to a park. And maybe Bob can tell us a little bit about local procurement as it involves working with local providers. So Justin, can you take it first on the sort of how do you select, and what about there's a children's park stone's throw away?
For sure. Again, I think when we're looking at site selections and in a regular time or regular environment, one that's not within a pandemic, we do a lot more robust sightings or looking at different requirements. However, at this time, we were looking for sites that would meet our minimum requirements, and I went through some of those things when I was speaking to the presentation. So, Whether it's close to a park or not is not necessarily something we look at, but we do look at the bylaws and the housing charter. We look at zoning requirements, and we also look at the site being within the vicinity to community services such as libraries, public parks as well, pharmacies, and healthcare services. So, you know, the individuals and the residents within this location are citizens within the community as well. So being close to a public park and having access to that might be good for the mental health and well-being of individuals that are utilizing the service. So I do want to emphasize that fact as well. And, you know, if there's libraries and pharmacies and healthcare services around, we're looking for those types of things because these are residents within our communities and they are citizens of the city of Toronto. So.
Thank you, Justin. Bob, do you want to just quickly tell us about well, a relationship with Gabby's and generally how you're proceeding in terms of local procurement?
Yes, we have entered into a contract with Gabby's, the existing franchise located within the property, and they are providing essential meals for our service users on a contractual basis, which meet all the criteria as established by, and I'm not going to go into the detail that what Ssha has as far as what needs to be observed from a health and safety point of view, and adequate nutrition, and certainly Canada Food Guidelines. The good news is also, and in support of shelters, and I applaud our counselor's office in working on this, but allowing us the opportunity to meet with our neighbors, our independent neighbor businesses, which is tremendously important. And I'll give you just an example of some. Paul's Roadie Shop, which is right across the road from us. By the way, I'm not doing advertising, but their rotis are remarkable. And so we had Paul's Roti Friday local procurement night, and our residents loved it. We've entered into, we're buying our social rec and education. Tim Hortons, there's a Tim Hortons franchisee right across from us, so we are purchasing these gift cards. And folks would say, well, you don't have any real social rec and ed right now. We will have. We used to have what I call one of the wickedest Trivial Pursuit games, and everybody's a winner. And just love to see the resident participation. Those are there because we will have individuals that will be referred to us for central intake who are absolutely penniless. Their file hasn't been opened as yet by Ontario Works, and so at least we've got something we can say, yes, your primary needs are being met, your basic health care needs are being met, but George, here's a $20 Tim Hortons card. You can go across and get a coffee and kind of feel and start to work towards feeling, you know, somewhat normal again. Lord's Pharmacy on Wellesley Street, small independent pharmacy, and we'll be purchasing all our first aid supplies. We'll also be purchasing, following some other direction from Toronto Public Health, the Works, some of the supplies needed for harm reduction. Another restaurant we've landed on, or business that's locally owned on Parliament Street, St. Jamestown Chops and Steaks. We've also reached out to Cranberries, which is on Parliament Street, because it's an active going local business. And so we're rotating. Friday night meals are going to be our local procurement night, and I just know that our service users will be tremendously appreciative of that. We're going to reach out to, and Home Hardware on Parliament Street right now I think is closed, but once they reopen, and I'm optimistic, there's a local business where we can purchase some of our necessary housekeeping cleanliness product from. And once again, putting our tax dollar back into the very same community that is helping to support our city in providing these services. And I applaud our counselor's office and her staff for and our funder, the city itself, for supporting this and recognizing it. And once again, helps us in being a good neighbor. And I believe also was part of, in a larger perspective, community safety and protocol, because these businesses are part of our eyes and ears. Hope
Great.
that answers the question, Jane.
I believe it does, Bob. I wanted to ask you, if anyone has asked a question and put their hand up, you have to lower your hand, unless your hand is up again because you'd like to ask another question. That's great, thank you. Again, the Q&A box is open. Maybe I'd like to, this is a topic that's come up in the Q&A box about needles and other issues of, you know, a very concerning issue that comes up in all these sorts of conversations, which is, you know, what if there's discarded needles? What are people to do about them? And the concern, of course, would be for children in the parkette, but really anywhere a needle is disposed of not safely is a concern for the community. So I would like to call on Bob and Brad to, maybe we'll start with Brad, to simply sort of review what the city policy is and how needle pickup works and what people need to know in the community and what they can do and who they should call. Brad, do you want to take this first?
Sure, Jane, thanks. I mean, the first recommendation would be to be contacting the community safety team. We've provided the number on the presentation tonight, and we can certainly provide that again. They are tasked with the responsibility of picking up needles and other drug paraphernalia. So you can certainly call the community safety team directly, or you could also call the shelter to let them know about it, and they can also take care of getting the community safety team over to take care of those challenges.
That's great. Okay, thank you, Brad. Bob, do you want to add anything on needle, discarded needles, how the shelter itself can help in trying to mitigate or solve or, you know, address this problem if it emerges?
Yes. To date, and just our real-time figures over the last 7 days, has been that our community safety team has retrieved and transported to the shelter for safe disposal 37 syringes that were used. And I look at that, that's 37 less cases of potential infection. And I just want to identify that currently within Clubhouse, we have no residents that inject substances into themselves. We have one service user that injects insulin once a week. The shelter has sharps containers in each one of our residents' rooms. We have sharps containers at the what we refer to as the intake desk. We have and are working with the Works will be retrieving those used items and drug paraphernalia and disposing of them, their biological waste and a hazard, in an appropriate, safe manner. The one thing I'd ask of folks, do not, within our community, if you see a syringe, contact the shelter so we can communicate immediately with the community safety team. They're trained. There's special equipment, certainly puncture-proof gloves that are tactile. There is a process in disposing of it. Please don't run the risk. Allow us to assist and be supportive of that.
Terrific. Again, I in case people want to write it down, it's handy. I got you there, Sergeant Dick. The community safety phone number is 647-688-8927. Yes, Sergeant.
Yeah, this isn't obviously my area of responsibility, but I just happen to have information about who does provide some of the service around this in the area. So recently, Casey House has started a team that will do needle pickup because they are providing harm reduction in the area, and they feel it's important that they do some of the pickup of needles in the area. So if you happen to be a neighbor and you see needle on the property and it's not on public property, it's on private property, obviously 311 won't come for that. Besides the CST team, if it's out of their range, etc., you can send an email to info@caseyhouse.ca. That's info@caseyhouse.ca, and they will send a team out to pick up the needles for you.
Very helpful. Okay. Yes, Councillor Wong-Tam.
Yeah, thank you, Jane, and thank you, Henry, for that additional information. I think it's very, very helpful. There is one other service that's coming into the community, and I just want to recognize that the Downtown East Action Plan is an elevated level of service delivery for our Ward 13, Toronto Centre, and there are 2 new enhanced services that will be rolling out in the community as of April. One is a city outreach team that's going to be doing some of the work that Casey House has already started. And Casey started that work about a month ago. And so there's going to be a dedicated team of outreach workers that will come and pick up needles. So there is now what you're going to see is the city responding to the fact that, number one, we are in the midst of an overdose and an opiate crisis, and we're trying to mitigate some of the harm that's sort of falling to the wayside and coming into the communities. And that's when you see the discarded syringes, the improperly discarded drug paraphernalia. We want to get that off of private and public property. And so there will be contact information that will be provided. Once we have it, we will make sure that we push it out to the community. But there's going to be a larger response, so you won't have to rely on Casey House. There will be a City of Toronto response, and that is coming very shortly. The other thing, of course, is the City of Toronto, through the Downtown East Action Plan, is actually funding a de-escalation team. So it's even on top of what the community safety team will do. It's going to be on top and supplementing and complementing the work that Toronto Police Service will do. And the de-escalation team is going to be a multidisciplinary, community-based service that allows you to contact them, this de-escalation team, when you see someone who's in distress. So perhaps someone who is living through psychosis at that moment. You know that they're not violent, but they need to have someone to speak to and someone to actually provide them some support at that time in place in the community. And so that's coming to this neighborhood very shortly. So we will introduce these new services once everybody has been properly onboarded and we have the contact information in place and they've been trained. We hope to invite them out so that meet them and speak to them directly. And that's coming in April. So just a month or so away, but it's on its way. Thanks, everyone.
It's great. Thanks for those sort of anticipate some questions some information we wanted to get out. So thank you. Actually, anticipating a question myself, I know it's been on the minds of Torontonians around vaccine and shelter residents. Is there anyone, I'm not sure if this could be directed to Justin or Brad, but there is certainly talk of Toronto Public Health trying to get the vaccines out to homeless population because they're exposed to a great deal greater risks of hospitalization and even death. That was announced, I think, in the last couple of days. Do you know if there's plans for the residents of Clubhouse to be vaccinated in the near future? Is that a Justin or a Brad or a Justin? There you go.
Councillor, did you want to say something, or is it okay that I
mean, Justin, go first. I was just going to speak from as the vice chair of the Board of Health, but I think you're probably going to cover what I'm going to say. So please go ahead.
Okay. So just to share some information, provincial officials confirmed for the city that vaccinating those experiencing homelessness is now part of phase 1 priority for vaccinations. So the government of Ontario is responsible for establishing the vaccination prioritization frameworks for all Ontarians. Toronto Public Health is currently working closely with SSHA and our provincial partners such as Ontario Health, Toronto Region, and local Ontario health teams to plan for the vaccinations of the next priority groups in the upcoming weeks. That includes frontline workers in congregate settings, including shelters and people experiencing homelessness. Shelter providers will be contacted by their local Ontario health teams to begin planning for vaccination clinics at their sites. And to date, Unity Health has conducted pilot vaccination clinics in at least 3 shelter sites to help inform the playbook. Those that refuse vaccinations, the city follows all provincial rules for vaccination requirements. And I knew that may be a question that follows this. So currently vaccinations are not mandatory, and city staff are working to provide education and information to clients about the safety of vaccines and address any concerns that may be raised to encourage participation.
Thank you,
Justin. Do you have
Justin.
anything you want to add?
No, I think, Justin, you filled it in brilliantly. The only thing I would say is that because the population that's been identified in shelters and experiencing homelessness has been elevated into phase 1, given the concerns that I've heard from some of the community members about not seeing those who are street or seeing those who are street involved, not socially distancing properly and not wearing masks. And I think Bob would have spoken to it in terms of some of the developmental challenges that people may be experiencing if they are homeless, perhaps just the other things that are plaguing them. This is actually a really positive, good move, and the Board of Health has been lobbying the province to actually ensure that those who are in congregate setting get into phase 1. So it's a very good outcome because we have seen that if we can eliminate the transmission within community, the more we reduce that, the safer we're all going to be a lot faster. So thank you.
Thank you. I am mindful, we have Mitchell Lamont here, who's from the city's Street to Homes department. And I know in other meetings, a lot of people ask what they can do if they see people experiencing homelessness, and they're concerned about them. So Councillor Wong Tam addressed to an aspect of this, but could I get you, Mitchell, to sort of give some insight and information about what people can do, who they can call, how they can help?
Yes, of course. So mainly the way to contact the team that's on 24/7, 365 days in the year, Streets to Homes, is through 311. And they work alongside partner agencies, YMCA, Native Men's Residence, Gateway Albion Services, Aging Court Services, multidisciplinary outreach team, which is referred to as MDOT, which is similar to the plan that Councillor Wong Tam is talking about coming in April. They're a multidisciplinary team that provides various organizations that works with various organizations that deliver services to the most vulnerable on the street, which includes having outreach workers, case managers, a registered nurse, a housing worker, and a part-time psychiatrist. So basically, when you see someone experiencing homelessness outside, you're hoping they can connect to services to go indoors, hopefully. You can call 311 and the team will respond within the 4-hour window that they provide.
So I think we're at a place where there are no additional questions. I think we've sort of gotten to what was in the Q&A box there, and seeing no further hands up. But if anyone listening and attending the meeting has any other comment or question at this time, this is really the moment to weigh in here. I should tell you that this is that we're open for business in terms of community engagement. We're not going away. You've met Bob, and thank you for Bob persisting through some technical challenge, so they weren't actually able to see you if they were on their computer. But I have a feeling you're the kind of guy that's going to be at the facility quite a bit and would be happy to meet people in that context as well. As you say, they're your neighbors, and you're building those relationships as much as you can. So that is there's also a website. Obviously, I've given you the contact information. We're going to write a community bulletin that pulls together your comments, questions, concerns, and distributes it through this, neighborhood networks and stakeholder groups to get information out. Maybe, is there one more question in the Q&A? Oh, look at this. Thank you. We do have another question. Here we go. So someone here wants to thank you, Bob, for your work in the community. They are asking a very salient question. Will you be offering overdose prevention services in-house? The nearest outside site is rather far away from the hotel. Very on point. Question, Bob, can you answer that?
Yes, it will be in-house. And obviously, it'll be in-house specific for our existing service users. And we have set up a very, what we call a wellness program and wellness check. And we're working on refining to ensure that usage on site is within the privacy of a service user's room with either peer support or staff monitoring. And that's just to be there in case of that situation. All our staff are trained, obviously, in use of naloxone. Our experience, and our Sergeant Dick could probably attest to that, at our previous sites, we have had 5, and staff, and they were overdoses, and because of that quick and expeditious intervention, those individuals are still alive and with us today. So that is our hope. We're aware of what's plaguing us. We're aware of what opiates are doing. And we will do our utmost through harm reduction to work with individuals to start the process of providing consideration for other alternatives, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I support our local community policing because we're at ground zero with them. And I can express this my firsthand. I've seen some tremendous supportive response from those folks in uniform, and most specifically my experience being within 51 Division. So we're there, we're together, our EMS team response. We will do our utmost to mitigate this plague, and it's a plague. Mm-hmm. And we're not laying any shame or blame because that it'll have no positive outcomes. So we support our city. I think we're all on page that we're doing our utmost, and we'll get there. Anyways, that's my positive response as best as possible.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Bob. And we do have a person with their hand up, so I'm going to go to Carolyn to unmute.
Sure, yes. Thanks, Jane. I'm unmuting you. You're unmuted.
Anyways, what I was asking was, when the COVID gets, when there is less of a threat, can the hotel accommodate more individuals? And does the 1 year lease stipulate that there's to be a maximum of 37 residents, or can it go up to 200, or just?
Yeah.
Because I do have concerns. I do have concerns about safety in the area, and I'm not. Nobody is unsympathetic, or I'm amazed to it all the nice services you're offering, but at the end of the day, you want to feel safe, and you don't want your property, values to really decline. And I'm just worried because there seems to be an awful lot of services being lumped in this one area: Fife House, Casey House, and you've got the Isabella Hotel. They're all along Isabella Street, with all within a block and a half of each other. So
yeah, no, it's an excellent question, and I know your name's not Brenda, so I won't call you Brenda, but yeah, so I'm going to go to Bob first. What's the capacity, the absolute limit to how many residents can be in Clubhouse and accessing the services there? It's not a drop-in, so it's only going to be the people inside that facility. What's the number Bob?
The number is 36.
It's not going to be 200. It can't
No.
grow.
No.
You can't cram more people into the rooms. The whole thing is about temporary shelter and distancing. Justin is nodding furiously. Justin, do you want to elaborate just to say this is a service for a set number of people? That's the way it'll stay.
I would just echo what you said, Jane, and what Bob said. The number is 36. There are no additional rooms, and we are not looking to increase the capacity over that.
Okay. All right. We're at 8:20. We're actually pretty much on time. I see no further questions or comments or raised hands, so I'm going to turn to the next part of our presentation, which is really sort of go over a few next steps and reflections. And Councillor Wong Tam, I'm coming back to you first to reflect and look forward.
Jane, thank you very much, and thank you to everyone who joined us this evening. I've actually now attended a number of these different types of meetings, largely as we roll out another service in the community. I recognize that there is some concern here, and rightfully so. I think you have every right to get the information that you seek. And if the information was not satisfactorily delivered or provided to you, or perhaps the information just was not available tonight, please do make sure that you stay in touch with Jane and the team here. You have their contact information because you have the right to that information that you seek. And I just want to recognize that, you know, we are in incredible pandemic times. None of us have lived through this. And I have to say that there hasn't been a perfect playbook. Some of the shelter hotel facilities have been challenging. It's been challenging for my office, fielding the number of phone calls, listening to community concerns, and also coordinating what I believe is the appropriate response with respect to the TPS partners, Toronto Police, as well as SHA, our Streets to Home team, Toronto Public Health, the Parks Ambassador, and there have been times where it has not gone well. I want to make sure that we learn from those mistakes because the program that's being rolled out today is not exactly unknown to us. So you have a provider of service, St. Simon's, who is already in the neighborhood. The clientele and the members that they're moving over to the Isabel Hotel are known to them. So this is actually a very encouraging first step because we know who's the operator and we know who the client is. And so there's a history and there's relationships that have been built that hopefully we'll be building upon and they'll be stronger. The point that Henry Dick pointed out is the unknown factor. And this is where we're all going to have to be a lot nimble to make sure that when there are things that you are seeing in the community, please do not assume that we know it's happening. Please let us know that you're seeing and that you have some questions or concerns so that we can deploy the right individuals and staff persons or the right divisions to respond to it. And it's only by watching out and looking after each other can we keep each other safe, make sure that the homeless are not further victimized sometimes because there's some fear, and to make sure that the residents who are already here, business owners here, will be able to see this as a welcome addition to the community, because the shelter hotel, when it's successfully operated, when it's well integrated to the community, then it becomes a seamless transition. And that is ultimately what I think we all hope for, and that's what we are striving for tonight. On the screen, you will see my contact information. Please don't be shy. Some of you are not. You've already reached out to me. I encourage you to do so. Lula Hassan is my staff contact and lead for this neighborhood, and she will be your contact moving forward. If you want to reach out to me directly and you want to speak to me as your local counselor, I also welcome those calls and those inquiries. Anytime, anywhere, we should have that conversation, and my office is ready and willing to serve and support you. Thank you very much, everyone. And to those who organized tonight's discussion, thank you for your time as well.
Thank you very much, Councillor. We're just going to have one more slide, just a bit more next steps, and we'll say goodnight. We basically want to thank you for your time. Eloquently said by the councillor already, we got lots of information through this. We'll be wrapping up your feedback and questions into a summary of this meeting. It will be posted on the project website. Again, is at toronto.ca/physical distancing shelters. We will be around for a while yet to receive your comments and questions and, queries. 556sherburne@gmail.com is a direct link, but through the counselor as well. However you get them to us, we will respond. And the recording of this evening's meeting will also be posted on the city's YouTube channel. Again, it will be closed captioned. So these are ways that you can be in touch with us. We want to be in dialogue. The objectives of this initiative with the community engagement is, of course, to bring the community together to facilitate the transition and establishment of this shelter in the immediate neighborhood. You've been really great. Your questions were all on point, and keep them coming. Everyone wants to feel safe, whether you're in the shelter or in the neighborhood or just in this city. We want to up the odds that this city is safe and welcoming for all. So there's no question that we can't take on, address, and try to engage with. So thank you for your willingness and being an awesome citizen, for being here tonight. Citizenship is an excellent thing, and engagement is great. So really, we don't take it lightly that you come and sit on a Webex link for a couple hours. We really, really honor that. So thank you for being engaged, and hopefully you'll stay in touch. I think that's it. Good night, and thanks again. Bye for now.